is going on, everyone? We are Tottenham TV. Spurs have survived. We are Premier League next season. We have beaten Everton 1-0. A massive sigh of relief. I think you could palpably hear 60,000 Tottenham fans breathing a sigh of relief in that stadium, and many more worldwide as well. Unbelievable. Spurs have stayed up with 7 games to go. Zerbi came into this football club with Spurs on the brink of relegation, having not won in 2026, was no wins in 14, in the relegation zone. It would look like a miracle at that point to try to keep Tottenham up. West Ham were in form, Forest were looking good, but we have done it on the final game. This 1-0 win has got us over the line. I'm here with Marlon from Spurs Kings TV. Marlon, they made us sweat today, but you got to say, we turned up today and we actually did play well.
I think that was key. I think we had to sit there and get a performance, and we were good for about 60 minutes, and then we kind of let Everton back in. And I think on any other day, I don't think we would have been as nervous. But look, if that's the performances we're going to get under Zerbi next season, with what we can say is not a great squad of players, then, you know, it's looking promising. It's looking really, maybe we won't get another season like this, and hopefully Zerbi will stick with us. But look, going back to the game, I think once we went 1-0 up, I think they got a bit comfortable, the players a little bit. Yeah, we got a little bit comfortable, and then I think, obviously, when West Ham scored and it must have filtered through, we kind of just let Everton have the ball a little bit. But I think
definitely a bit nervy in that second half, wasn't it? You got to say, first half, we came out and we were so strong. Good.
We were stopping everything in midfield. We were literally... Everton weren't getting anywhere near us.
Yeah, we pressed them a lot. We were raining shots on their goal. Not too many clear chances. Although you have to say we were a massive threat from corners every time we did get one. Everton were really struggling with dealing with from corners. Things were bouncing for Richarlison, Paulinho, Danso, and we could have scored before we did.
Yeah, that was probably our second best performance at home this season. I think Brentford will go down as one of the best because of Xavi and how good he was. Burnley was terrible on the first day. We just scored good goals. But today, for like 60 or 70 minutes, we were the better side. And we pressed them. It looked very much how we played against Villa. And I think that was key. And
it was good, but, you know, the only nervous thing, you know, going into that goal with half-time coming up, you know, we've been on top. We've, you know, been confident. We're looking good, but we just hadn't got that goal, had we?
No, and that was the thing, yeah.
And, you know, going in at 0-0, having not got that goal, knowing one goal for Everton could potentially see us down, that was obviously...
But if we
that was obviously nervy, so to get that goal just before half-time.
But if we weren't in this situation, if you actually look at that game and look at the way it was, Everton were never going to score against us today. That is how good we were defensively. Every time the ball went in the box, Danso was at the end of it. Any time it was on the floor, Van der Ven would put in that last-minute tackle in. Your doggy was winning the balls. How many times did we see Pedro Porro win the ball back in situations?
They were up for it today.
They were definitely up for it. And it was like, they've gone and saved they're probably one of their best performances at home for the last game of the season. And I'm glad they did.
But you know what? Ever since Zerbi's come in, we've been pretty good at home. You know, we've played quite well in those games. We probably should have won one of those other games.
So Brighton, we should have won. Leeds, I think we kind of
draws maybe fair.
Fair
today
in the
we
end.
deserved the win.
And we definitely
I think that was the difference today. Is yes, we, you know, when we had to be on the offensive and we had to take the game to Everton and we had to put them under pressure. We did that.
Yep.
But when we did have to shut up shop and we did have to make sure they're not scoring today, that we're not going to concede a goal. We did that, and I think we shut up shop at the end really, really effectively.
Yep.
I think for the majority of the game, it wasn't a case of stopping Everton. It was more of a case of we just kept them away from our goal. They struggled to get near our box.
Yeah, they did.
They really struggled. The only way they were doing it is just hoisting the ball into our box with long balls, and Danso and Van der Ven were definitely mopping those up. And I thought we defended with courage. We just kept the ball. We were calm for the majority of the game. But as you say, I did feel there was it did change a bit when West Ham scored.
Yeah, I don't know why. It just felt...
Yeah, you just felt a little bit nervous. All of a sudden, it went from when Tottenham were like playing it around the back. all of a sudden it went from Tottenham fans being excited by that, but being nervous. You felt you could hear the crowd.
It was the crowd was getting nervous.
They were getting a bit jittery, even though we weren't really putting ourselves in any danger. You just heard a bit of jitters from the crowd and a bit.
But we were still winning it. We were still gritty in midfield, and I think that was key. I think that's why we weren't. I think me and you sat here and we weren't as nervous as what the crowd was, because we're seeing actually Benson, Paulina, and Gallagher were putting in such a shift. And even when Sarr came on, you could tell that Everton just didn't know where to put it. So, but yeah, it was interesting. But I think that's where the battle was won today in that midfield. But if we had a better forward line, we probably end up winning that by a bigger scoreline. Yeah,
and obviously, Tell was pretty good for the first half, but then slowed down a bit in the second half. For Richarlison off on the hour. Obviously, Jed Spence played right wing today, and I think he did his job. I think he did the job that we asked him to.
Yeah.
Defense. I think he was kind of defending from the front in a really impressive way.
Yeah.
I think obviously, when he got on the ball, you could see this guy's a defender in the forward line. He was struggling with that real quality. But I think in terms of what the job Zerbi probably asked of him today, I think he did it really into a really good effect. And I think, he ran the whole game. He played 90 minutes, moved to left back near the end. I think he helped out Porro really well, and obviously got the job done at the end. And I think Paulinho stepping up in a big moment as he has done this season. 5th goal.
You think,
it could be his last game. We'll see whether Spurs.
You've got to think of the big important goals he has actually scored this season. So the Wolves won at home.
Yeah, massive
point when you think about what happened at the end. Wolves away was massive again, and then today, and you're like, those 3 goals are so important in what ends up happening.
He's had a massive say in us staying in the league, hasn't he? Especially since Zerbi's come in. Those 2 goals, the 2-goal and 1-0 wins have kept us in this league.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't score those goals, who knows where he'll be? You saw the emotion in his eyes. I don't know if this is going to be his last game or not. We have to wait and see what the club decide. But fair play to him. He's come in on loan and he's done brilliantly in those moments. Look, he's not a perfect player, but he's a player in these big moments who's really, really stood up for the team. And when it mattered, the ball fell to him. He just, wasn't the prettiest goal, but they all count, and he stepped up in a really big moment. And I think Tottenham near the end, with the news, West Ham had won 3-0, 9 minutes added on, stoppage time here. It did get a little bit nervy. All of a sudden, Everton started to pick the lock a bit. Tyreek George had that moment he got in behind, which Van de Ven had to clear. And then obviously a massive moment where George cuts inside and Kinski makes a fantastic one-handed save and just carries on what has been a brilliant end to the season for Kinski. He kept his clean sheet, but what a brilliant moment for him. Brilliant save. And it capped off what has been a brilliant resurgence for him and a brilliant comeback from what was such a bad moment at Atletico.
Yeah.
And he potentially, you look at those moments he's had, those saves, massive part in keeping us up.
And I always said I was never going to judge Kinski until I saw him in front of the first team defence, because I think everyone harshly criticised him for always playing in front of it. It was a makeshift back 4. That's what he had. And then everyone's like, Vicario showed his worth last season. But I think this season there's been many, many questions on the Kinski and Vicario debate. And at the moment, as its push comes to shove, Kinski's in the last few games has shown that he was the keeper that we had to keep it, especially for this style of play. Because what was so important to Kinski coming in was the ball at his feet. So important. So what I'm looking at now is, look, do I want Kinski to be our number 1? As if I'm being honest, no. I think we need to go out and get a better goalkeeper than Vicario and Kinski. If we want to be a serious Premier League team, unfortunately, there are better keepers in the world of football that are better than those 2. Okay, Kinski's a great backup, but he's not the one to be number 1. But there's many more players in this team at the moment that I'm sitting there.
With Kinski's run, does he deserve a shot? A lot of people are saying yes because he's been brilliant, and the biggest part of his game where people said is his shot stopping, and brilliant stops recently.
That goal against Chelsea, the Enzo Fernandez, reminded me of how sometimes he cannot be. He moves too late, and he's not for me. I'll admit, he's just not for me. I think he's a great second choice goalkeeper, but I think he has shown his vulnerabilities in certain games where he has conceded. Don't get me wrong, but he's also been brilliant.
No, I just want to give him his,
Yeah, he deserves his flowers, and he's been brilliant. And that save at the end, and those 2 saves against Leeds, and especially after everything that happened in Atletico, and the way Tudor treated him, you have to go. You know what? He deserves all the praise that he gets. But the question's always going to be, and Spurs fans, we're going to overreact of should he be our number 1 next year? And my thing is, no, we need to go. If we're going to be serious club that we all want us to be, and we don't want to finish 17th, Kingsley's not the person to take us forward. But for this season and what he's done and keeping us up, deserves every little bit of praise that he gets coming towards him in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I wonder what will happen with him next season. It'll be interesting to see what the management choose. But look, we did go over that, and obviously, after the 9 minutes added on.
Yep.
Massive relief at the end. They did get a bit jittery, but at the end of the day, when you look at it, it was, they needed to score 2 goals.
They did. They had to score 2.
In the last moment of the game. So it was always unlikely. I think Spurs kept them at arm's length well enough. They had a few headers over the bar and never really threatened, did they? And I think that is emblematic of what we've been under Zerbi, in the sense that I think the big thing he's changed is actually, as much as we've been better like with our football, we have been better defensively just because we're defending less.
Yes.
And that is the key. For De Zerbi. And I think that's exactly what happened on the last day. We defended much better today, but it wasn't, we didn't defend much better because we kept 11 players in our box, you know what I mean? We defended better because we kept the ball better, and we just... Everton struggled to get near our box because they had less chance to.
And since that mistake against Brighton with Danso, you notice they've told him not to play. He doesn't need to play with the ball at his feet. He just goes and clears it. And ever since that moment, you've got a good defender now, because he won everything in the air today. Absolutely everything. He was solid, and he's been solid since that game against Brighton. He's actually been... he was good in that game too, don't get me wrong, but the mistake at the end will always overshadow. But today, him and Van der Ven, you have to call out exactly what they did, and they were absolutely brilliant today, both of them. They were so solid.
So we won, we are safe, and I'm just at the moment looking at Roberto De Zerbi and his celebrations. How much credit does he deserve, man, for keeping us in the Premier League? As I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, what he took over, not only the form, the mood around Tottenham. He was our 3rd manager of the season. The injury crisis that we had, and still going. Not only that, it worsened. He came into the team and he lost Romero, he lost Xavi,
and he lost
Solanke. Every step of the way, you're thinking it gets harder and harder, and you're thinking, how is he going to get the results we need? At the end of the day, he's managed 7 games. We've won 3. Drawn,
but this is what we were looking for. But this is what we were looking for in a manager, that someone who's going to be able to deal with this adversity and be able to cope with what he's been given in front of him, like Areola has done at Bournemouth a little bit. And we always said you've got to be able to cope with these injuries. And to be fair to De Zerbi, and I do you know what? And when everyone was like moaning that he's going to lose his crap at players and this, that, and the other, and I was like, as people actually listening to the positive stuff that all these players are talking about him when he came in, like Lallana and all that, Højbjerg, you heard them say how much they loved him, and actually he was that arm around the shoulder manager, but no one wanted to listen to that. Everyone wanted to watch that video that he did with Marseille where he was shouting at the player. But everyone, if you actually go back and watch the interviews and everything around those 2 players, and especially when they had the fight, was the fact that they weren't listening to what he was saying. It wasn't a one-off. So when he came in, and when he was talking about Kingsley, and then he was talking about Mawani, look, he knew he needed Mawani. And we were like, have you seen him all season? But he had no choice to play him because he had Richarlison and Mawani were his only 3 attacking players, and he went, I need this player to be playing exactly how he was at Frankfurt, and no matter how all of his bad performances that he put in, he still stuck by him, and he didn't call him out once. And I think Tuesday, because of the mistake, I think he thought he had no choice, and he had to kind of bring Spence in today. But that shows you the type of manager he is, and he has taken risks. A lot of us have moaned about his substitutions again this season, but again, he's managed to pull us out of trouble, and he's managed to get us literally over the line, and that's all he had to do.
Who would have seen 3 wins coming? Think about it. We hadn't won for 4 months. We were 15 games without a win.
Yeah, 15 games.
When he took over, and yet we said, which by the way, it ended up he needed to.
Yep.
We need 3 wins in these 7 games. I remember we were like, how is he going to get 3 wins when we haven't won in 4 months, and he's managed to get them by hook or by crook. He's got them over the line. Now, it's not been. I don't think we've seen full-on Zerbi ball anywhere near yet. I don't think we have reached the potential anywhere close to what we can do under this manager. But you know what? He's set himself a 7-game challenge. Can I just keep this team in the division? Can I get the wins needed with all the injuries, all the all the circumstances surrounding the squad and the friction between the players and the fans and the nonsense in the boardroom, all this kind of stuff. And to win these 3 games and get the 2 draws, that has been enough to just keep us in the division. I think it's a fantastic, astounding achievement from him. And I really didn't see it coming, especially as the situation, the circumstances kept getting harder and harder the longer he was in charge of this club. And to win the 3 games and keep us in the division, even though it's on the last day, congratulations, Roberto Zerbi. And I'm excited for him next season. I'm excited for what he can do. And, hopefully he gets the players that can play his football. And all of a sudden we can start looking to the future and start getting excited about what he can do.
It was against Sunderland, and he knew. He saw something that day. He saw that he could work with this squad because it was a 1-0 deflection. We had chances to put it away, especially in the first half against Sunderland. We didn't actually play that badly. But I think it was his interview after the Brighton game, and that's when I believed in him because I said we were gone. You'll find anything on YouTube. I said we're gone, we're down, ain't gonna happen.
Even when we got the win against Wolves, it came off the back of West Ham getting a last-minute goal and us losing Javi and Solanke.
But he's like you said. He said we needed those 3 wins. He thought we could win all 6. That was his belief. But actually, when you hear him and what he was talking about, you could actually believe it in his voice. He believed it. And I was thinking, you've been behind the scenes now for nearly 2 weeks because you've been working for 2 weeks. And obviously, when Tudor came in and been working, his attitude changed as soon as he got in behind the scenes. But he said, no, I think I can get 6 wins. And then we obviously got the win against Wolves, and then we got the win against Aston Villa, which was, at the time, we didn't realise how important that Villa game was. That was the weekend West Ham got relegated, by the way.
Which one? The
Villa weekend, yeah. Because that was the weekend they lost to Brentford. And that was the weekend that we got the victory that we needed. And that was obviously what happened next. But look, they've got to back to Zerbi. When I say back to Zerbi, they've got to now trust him and believe in what he wants to do. But I think what the club now have to understand is, I'm not going to say it, a lot of these players need to be shifted. They just got to get rid of them. They just got to make a loss and get rid of them, because if you don't, half of these players are going to keep us in this situation again. And the season's been an absolute waste of time. If we're being honest, the fact we're in this situation, it's been an absolute waste of time for us this season as a fan base, that we've had to watch this rubbish from start to finish. And I think these last 6 games have probably been the highlight of our season.
And as you say, you mentioned, by the way, Zerbi, when he said, after the Brighton game, we drew in the last minute and we were in the relegation zone at that point. And I think at that point, if West Ham would have won on the Monday, they would have gone 4 points clear of us. And we got away with that. But he said, what did he say after that game? We can win all 5. We can win 5 out of 5. I've got the players to do it. Obviously, we didn't do that. But what we did do is won 3. We won 3, we drew 1, and we lost 1 of his last 5 games when we looked dead and buried. And no one saw that coming. No one thought we were going to be capable of that. And you look at the table now, we've stayed up with 2 points. Every single one of those results was crucial. Absolutely crucial to us staying in the division. So it was such a fine line. We stayed up. West Ham went down on 39 points. That is probably a record not a record, but it's since they lost since 2003.
Since they last went down.
I don't think anyone has gone down on 39 points for a good 15 years. So that was the level that we had to stay above to make sure we were in the division for next season. And it was such a narrow kind of route to safety, and we just about got over the line. I just want to heap so much praise on him, because to get the results that we did, fair play. But you know what? We should never have been in this position. And as much as it feels good today, or relief today, to stay up and confirm, we should never have been in this position. It's not something to celebrate.
No.
It's not something to celebrate. We should not be celebrating we're a Premier League team. We should always be a Premier League team. Tottenham should never be in relegation battles. We should never be leaving it to the final day to know whether we're going to be a Premier League team next season. And it's embarrassing that it got to this stage. And I understand, the celebrations with the players, with the manager, and Zerbi running on the pitch and all that kind of stuff. I enjoyed the passion, and
Zerbi can celebrate.
Zerbi, because he's just come in.
Yeah,
but
he lost 2 games.
He did have 7.
Yeah, so you got to give him credit.
No, it's a fair. No, Zerbi, I think he deserves all the praise. But
the rest
for
of them,
me,
him and Maddison.
This is not a time to be celebrating and think about what a great achievement. It's a time for self-reflection and understanding why we got in this position and never being in this position again. And it's about this hierarchy learning very, very harsh lessons about how we got into this situation.
Sim, they'll be sitting there now going, but we're the ones who brought in Zerbi. We're the ones who were able to get it. And that's what they'll be thinking.
7 games to go.
Yeah.
They left it in the balance.
Yeah.
The reason why I went down to the final day is because of their actions. They stayed for Frank with Frank for way too long. They stayed with Tudor. They should never have got Tudor in the first place. And then Zerbi, it was a Hail Mary. They panicked when they got Zerbi because we were about to go down.
They should have panicked
with
back
7
in January,
games to go, it should never have been. You don't give a manager 7 games to save you. It was never going to be.
The fact that, because it will always be the case of that Frank and Zerbi went pretty much on the same day, didn't they? It was pretty much within 24 hours of each other that they went.
Yeah.
And the fact that they wanted Zerbi last summer and he said no, and then the fact they probably went back in January a couple of days after, but the fact they got that desperate and they had to throw the bank at him. Okay, yeah, Zerbi's only here for money. Don't get it twisted. But he's come in and he's done such a wonderful job. And that's what I have to put in these 7 games. He's shown so much that a lot of us fans are looking at going, actually, if you go and give him mostly what he needs, he can start moving us forward. And I think that's what's key to this, because no matter how much we look at this squad was a mid-table squad at least. Never a relegation, never in a relegation, but mid-table. But they have shown nothing this season for me to even get carried away with. We're now in this situation. I'm so glad we stayed up. I'm relieved we stayed up. But it's now time that it's open heart surgery time, and it's going to be players that some people might like are going to have to leave. It needs a whole revamp, and they need to look at everything, absolutely everything. And if we don't, we're going to be in this situation again next season.
Absolutely.
2 seasons in a row, we have finished 17th. And I think people, we can look at the Europa League win, but 2 seasons we've finished 17th. And I'm not, like you said, there's no time for celebrating now. It's done. I've watched us stay in this league. It's time to now move on and get this. Because if we're in this situation next season, I tell you now, we're gonna be like West Ham. There's gonna be a point that we'll end up getting relegated.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important, while we were in this relegation run-in and while we were under pressure, to not obviously heap even more pressure on the players, with all these different things. But now safety is confirmed. Attention needs to turn to the board and putting pressure on the board and making our feelings known that this is unacceptable, that where we are this season, unacceptable the position they put us in. We should never, ever go through what we went through this season. We want to put this season to the back of our minds and just forget about it. It's brilliant that we ended up staying up, and now hopefully I think all the Tottenham fans have even more belief in this manager now because of what we've been through and how he's been able to save us. I think Zerbi deserves so much praise, and he should be back to the fullest over the season. We need different players, and we need players that can play the Zerbi football. And Zerbi's not going to tolerate, we know he's a bit of can be a bit of a hothead. He sometimes can be very demanding. So he's not going to tolerate the club not backing him and not seeing his vision. I think we've got in this position because everyone has followed Zerbi. Even people like Van der Ven, his form has completely turned around.
Oh, completely.
Brilliant again today. With some brilliant last challenges, and hopefully this manager can give the club and the players and the fans belief again that maybe next season, things can turn around and we can go on the up. But
maybe a Leicester season.
Who knows? I don't want to say anything. Obviously, we're going to be without Europe next season.
It's going to be massive.
Can just be thankful that we're in the Premier League, let alone any Europe.
But they've got to look at it and remember Andrew's first season. Remember how bulky that squad was.
Yeah.
But yet it still got us 5th. They have to think of the same thing because we had injuries that season too. But because we had such a massive squad, we were able to cope with them and we were able to get over the line in that 5th spot. Then we reduced the squad the next year and we had bloody European football. It just didn't make no sense. So they've really got to think about it.
Yeah, and in reality, is the Premier League is getting tougher and tougher. Look, as I said, this year 39 points went down. So to think we can just coast by and think we can keep making bad decision after bad decision, and it won't catch up with you in this day and age. This day and age
2 years in a row now.
You look at the middle teams, Sunderland coming up from the Premier League Championship and getting European football today.
Yeah.
You know, teams are getting smarter, they're getting better. Brentford's, Brighton's, Bournemouth's, all, two of them in European football now. It is getting tougher and tougher, so we can't afford to rest on our laurels.
A lot of Premier League teams took their eye off the ball because a lot of the teams that were coming out were going straight back down over the last few years, and I think that was the biggest issue. And I think like West Ham, Tottenham, you can clout Newcastle in that as well. Thought, oh, you know what, we'll be fine. We could, but the problem is, like you said, Sunderland have qualified for Europe. That is where we're at now. A lot of these teams are now catching us up because they're being better with recruitment. And that's the thing. Everyone's got access to data now. They don't need, to be putting scouts around the world now because you've got so much information at your fingertips that these clubs are able to be on the same level playing field as us. It's just when it comes down to money and wages and what you can pay for them is how important it is, and the coaches you bring in. We've got a coach now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's time for the players.
And I think not only do we have a coach that I think everyone believes in now.
Yeah.
Like, for all the other coaches, there's been people with big doubters and people saying, I'm not sure he's that good, or even when people, half the fan base liked with Ange, half the fan base didn't. Frank, no one really liked.
No one liked Frank.
Even before that, Conte
was 50-50 with people as well.
People didn't like his football, but I think everyone is getting behind Zerbi.
Yeah, and I think you can see it.
That is key. You see, the players are fully behind him. He's got the players bought in, and we just need to make sure we don't fuck this up.
Imagine what he's going to do at Kudos though.
Exactly.
I can't wait for that.
Look, he's managed to keep us up with
the bare minimum.
On the wing.
Yeah.
Richarlison having to run himself to the ground with players like Paulinho in the midfield, who I don't think is 100% his kind of player. Gallagher playing in the number 10, who's not a 10. Danso's playing centre back, who's not the best at passing.
Yeah, he's not good on the ball. Yeah.
Exactly. So all these things, he's managed to scrape together a team to get results.
Yeah.
And imagine
that's why I'm looking at him. Yeah, this is why I'm looking.
Give him the tools to actually, with his players, what he can do.
Well, this is why I'm looking at him going. He's done this with a crap team. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now I don't like half his players.
Team and crap form.
Crap form, and he's managed to pull this round. Yes, he's going to have a whole pre-season with them in the summer, but imagine what we can do if we gave him the squad that Mourinho had after Poch left. Something along them lines. Like Conte was able to do it. Yeah, we had Kane, don't get me wrong, but now we have to build a team, so let's get going.
All right, well, everyone, we can breathe a big sigh of relief tonight.
Because we are Premier League.
We are Premier League. Oh, but I guess a word on West Ham. They have been relegated. We are at the cost of us, obviously. They won 3-0 today, but they will be playing in the Championship next season. Obviously, it's a massive story. A West Ham, big club, who have not been relegated, I think, since 2011, I believe. So they've been in the Premier League for a while, although we've seen them being relegated in my lifetime a couple of times. But they look absolutely gutted.
But this was coming for them. This is why I'm looking at Spurs.
They're a lesson to us, aren't they?
They are a complete lesson to us because they've been moaning at their board, they've been moaning at the signings they've been making, and their recruitment has been, and their managers have been terrible. Like, I couldn't believe when they brought in Graham Potter. They're the ones who wanted David Moyes out. Just look at the contrast between Everton and West Ham now. So the fans have to pay some part in that as well, because they're the ones who wanted Moyes out. And then they've gone and trusted their board to pick these absolute terrible managers. And even when you hear them speak about Nuno, a lot of them don't like Nuno. Like, you've got to remember, he's been there since September, and even he couldn't get themselves out of this situation. So this is a big lesson for Spurs and the board to look at West Ham and go, if we keep treading the way we're going, we'll be with them.
Because exactly, they're actually a similar position. Recently won a European trophy, but don't really have a footballing plan. They've been going from manager to manager, similar to us, with no real philosophy, chopping and changing, with making bad decision after bad decision, trying to make panicking moves to bail themselves out, not sticking with anything, and making poor signings. The squad is a mishmash of all different managers' visions, and now they're down. And thankfully for us, we've just about stayed up, head above water. But I look at West Ham, and as much as it's great to get one over on them, they're the ones who are relegated this time, and they're the ones who are going to be in the Championship. Imagine the London Stadium in the Championship next season. 60,000 seater stadium in the Championship. It's incredible.
Well, one of the stadiums was going to go.
As much as it's something we can laugh at, and as much as something we can say, look, we got one over at West Ham, they're going to be going to Lincoln and Bolton and Millwall next season. That should be something we look at as a lesson to be learned, as something we have to try and avoid, and we can't act like that, because if we do, we can see West Ham weren't too big to go down, and neither are we.
Neither
and
were
we
we. We were that
nearly
close.
did. We
Before
just about
Tudor,
did it.
no, before De Zerbi, we were going down. We were literally going down.
Exactly.
So-
So there we have it. Thank you all for joining us for what has been obviously a long season. We've just about stayed up. It is now your chance to have your say about Tottenham survival today.